All right, thank you so much for coming today. Andrew, big fan of a lot of your work. Really enjoyed Twilight of the Gods. And my first question is going to be, how'd you get involved with animation directing, and was it something you were always interested in?
Yes, I mean, I've always been interested in directing and animation directing, and I mean, it started off when I went through art school years ago. I graduated and I did an arts degree in visual communication, and I graduated making a short film. Back in the days where you had to I had to paint my own cells and trace my own cells and shoot it under a rostrum camera. Shot it on 16 mil, and it was a kind of a homage to Pink Floyd's The Wall back in the day, uh, and that got me on bitten by the animation bug. And in Australia in the 90s, there's really no animation industry much, unfortunately. There's a couple of studios in Australia doing TV animation, but there was really nothing going on and no schools to learn it. So I taught myself in that time, did two short films, and I was very lucky. A friend of mine, mum, was a animation director, and she'd worked in London for many years. Wonderful woman called Anne Jolliffe, and she let me use all her studio gear, so I was able to make my little films and teach myself. Anne she was an animation director on Yellow Submarine and an Oscar-winning film called Great. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. And anyway, so with that, I got into film school and and taught myself through the master's program the 3D software. I could get my hands on the 3D software, Softimage and Maya and Flame, which is the compositing, and then made this short film that did the festival circuit. It actually was printed on film, which was a big thing in those days, and uh, and won a couple of awards, and that got me to the States. And I spent the next 16 years as an animation supervisor, animation character animator in commercials and features. I worked on about 30 features, Transformers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Benjamin Buttons, Flags of Our Fathers, a whole bunch, Pirates of the Caribbean, a whole bunch of bits and pieces. And in 2015, I had a good friend of mine who went and opened a course in at SCAD. He became head of department there, doing the motion graphics, that type of stuff. And he said, "Come over and teach if you want to change." So I did. I went over. I spent 18 months in Savannah, Georgia, teaching at SCAD, and was exposed to this wonderful, incredibly talented faculty of people who are just phenomenal artists. And it's the first time I really had kind of mentors there. And so I was teaching screen design and previs, character animation, mainly in 3D, and just got this crash course on from a guy called Giancarli, who was an incredibly talented director in his day. So it was fantastic, and I learnt so much, coupled with my film school background and my animation background. So 18 months later, I came back to LA, and I just literally DreamWorks reached out to me and said, would I be interested in working with them as an animation director? And I said, oh, of course. So I had friends of mine who worked with at Digital Domain many years before, and they were there, so they suggested me. So that's how I got into animation directing. Long story, but it's one of those things build on each other, and you kind of don't know where you're going to head, and then all of a sudden, all the pieces fall into place, and you're in a good spot. So at DreamWorks, I worked on Boss Baby back in business with Brandon Sawyer and Matt Ellison, who that was their first show. So I kind of shepherded them through through the 3D process of creating a show, and they were the kind of the boarding and the script people who were just terrific. And the show became a big hit. It was like Netflix's biggest show for kids for about 2 years. So DreamWorks put me on to Fast and Furious, which was a grand experiment for them. They kind of we did some great work on it, and towards the end of the show, because of COVID, it suffered on the show, but overall it was a really great show. Did really well. 52 episodes, and then from there, I got contacted by Netflix to meet with the Stone Quarry people and Zach and Jay and Debbie and Wes, who were the EPs on a show called what was it? Army of the Dead, Las Vegas. So I was employed to work on this zombie hard R-rated, very hard R-rated adult animated show that was the prequel to the movie that Zach had made for Netflix. So I worked on that for about 2 months, and they brought me in to kind of help shepherd it. The show was having some problems, so help shepherd it into a good space between the stakeholders and the studio. Unfortunately, once I got involved and certain things were uncovered, like, let's say Netflix moved in and canceled the show. So, which is a shame because the show was looking really good, and I know Zach had this plethora of sequels, wanting to do for it, and it was really a fun show. I mean, there was some really fabulous ideas in it, and plot points for these characters. It was like I always think of it as heavy metal meets like absolute zombie horror, right? So it's one of those types of things. But anyway, fortunately, they were doing another show, which was Twilight of the Gods, and that's how I landed on the Twilight as an animation director. Well, actually, I wasn't. They pulled me on as as a supervising director because they really needed someone to not just oversee the animation, but also because of certain situations that happened in the production to just oversee, the art department, help the producer with decisions, and just basically help shepherd the whole show from a 3D show to a 2D show. So there you go.
That's really cool. And also, so it's kind of a side note, but I didn't know you worked on Las Vegas. It's actually one I'd been curious about for a while, and I managed to find some artwork for it on some like artist website, and it looked
Right.
crazy. Like the stuff I saw was a lot of like, and then actually under a Q&A, Ross Butler responded to me when I asked him about it, and he said like, "Oh yeah, I really like the character," and he said his character was very fun, very boisterous. Those are his words.
Well, they were basically the same characters. There were a couple of extra characters that they developed, which I don't think I really can talk about, but
That's
they
fine. Yeah.
never really released it. But there were a lot of top actors involved, let's just say, and it was very dark. It was a very dark show, but it had it was the origin story of how we came to the movie, right? So it's explained a lot of the why things happened, and these different characters who were involved in this. It was a wild story, but there was a not giving too much away, being a Zach production. The last episode of this massive battle scene, of course, which I would have loved to have worked on because it was just nothing had ever been done like it before ever in animation. So Zach has incredible vision, and he gets very excited about these incredible these awesome journeys and lots of action. And it would have been a good show to for the public to see, but alas, it's in limbo.
I know that's what I'm still rooting. I remember he said he wanted to like release it as an animatic. I hope they do that someday. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, no, it was the animatics really good. I mean, it needed we needed to do. They brought me in to help fix things up in it because there were a lot of things that were not well. It was actually taking the animatic to previs that they were having issues with. So the animatic is you can enjoy it definitely just watching the animatic. So well, we'll see. That's his baby. So he will decide what he wants to do with that.
Are they from a little side tangent, but for Twilight of the Gods, what like phase in the process was it when you joined? Because I know, or like how was it still 3D when you did most of it, or were they in the process
Well,
of
they
making
did.
it
Well,
2D?
yeah, no, it was. So I came on. There'd been movement between in the show, but because it was the same studio that was slated to do Twilight that we were working with for Army of the Dead,
Vegas, yeah.
and so because of the change in production schedule, the Netflix didn't want to work with them anymore. We had to find a new partner. And so there was it had been developed as a 3D show, as you said. I had nothing to do with that. It was when it was decided to change studios, Sherry Gunter, who was the producer, she suggested to Stone Quarry to maybe revisit the designs of it because the original designs, I mean, they were great, but they were much more kind of, run of the mill. It's what you'd expect. Um, so she felt it was a good opportunity to really try and push the visual look of the show. So they used Jeff, who was he was the to do he was the lead designer to do environments. So he took over doing the environments, and Jans, who was a first time designer, who was brought on to do the character design. So that's why this show's got a very unusual, unique, I think, pretty cool look. It's kind of like a fairy tale,
Like a storybook.
dipped in blood. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a really dark kind of, but it kind of, it lends itself to Nordic kind of imagery. So I think it's a very exciting visually looking show. And yeah, that's when I got involved. When they'd already chosen the designers for the show, and and I just kind of helped them shepherd them through just the world building of it, just to make sure. I mean, they pretty much did it all, but it was my job was just to, on top of it, just to make sure they would work for the story in the specific designs.
Was it
So yeah.
intended? It reminds me a lot of like Tartakovsky's work, like Samurai Jack, like Primal. Were any of those influences for it? Because it reminded me a lot visually.
No, I'm a big fan of Gendy's work. I love Samurai Jack. I mean, I really love Dexter as well. And but No, not at all. Samurai, I know Primal, the look of it was developed by a studio called La Cachette in Paris because we actually spoke to them about working on a 2D version of the Army of the Dead at one stage. And they have a very, very specific visual look, especially with their line work. And that was a major influence in the look of the show. Gendy, I've never specifically worked with Gendy, although I'm working on a Gendy show, which is the Motel Transylvania. Uh, he has, from what I understand, he has a core group of people he works with pretty much on every show. So yeah, but no, we were not influenced at all. It was basically Zach looking at work and just saying, "I like that." That was what it was. Yeah.
I guess so I really liked I saw an interview where you were talking about how you made like a world Bible for all the characters, the environments, whatnot. I love stuff like that. And so I'm curious how you went about developing that and making it stay consistent with Eric's script while also telling the people working on it what they need to know about each person.
Well, I mean, every show I work on, I do a lot of research. I think that's one of the key things for success in any creative endeavor, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm very much on character, complex character, simple story. You want to have a lot of layers to the character, a lot of, subtext to them. So I do a lot of research in creating, and this is mainly for the studio um, that we're using to give the animation crews a basis that they can, be able to delineate how each character acts, right, in different situations. So yeah, I mean, I do a lot of research on just actors, right, mainly live action, uh, and create a literally like a little 5 minute clip of key way the characters act, and then give them um, I, I did years ago. I did a course with a guy called Ed Hooks, who was initially brought in the late '90s to help studios develop characters, and he was an improv guy, and he was very much into status. I think that's a very key point when you develop characters and how they relate to each other in the world building. So I really look at creating that point in each of the characters' kind of makeup for the uh, for the different personalities. But yeah, it's basically just cutting together, finding very pertinent clips to show and actors to show how these characters would act and how they would be perceived. Sometimes, and like Sylvia Hoek, who did Sigrid, she's been in quite a few uh, big productions, and so I had a lot of reference for her. So I could actually use reference from her acting, and she's quite very quite a good method person in creating the character for Sigrid. So one thing that Zach is very good at, he picks and like I him he I think he did a great job casting, helping cast the show. So we had a fantastic casting director as well, and of course Eric and Jay were involved as well. So, but they did a great job, picking the right talent for the roles, which is a big. I had nothing to do with that. I came on, there was already most of the dialogue was recorded by the time I got on the show.
So, do you remember what some of the reels you did for the characters were? Like, I've seen the one you did for Loki, where it's like Lee Pace is Thranduil, and
Yeah, yes.
and like
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I did. There were, I did. Who Ufa was, who Thera was, who Balder was. I mean, Balder. You wanted to talk about Balder. Balder was a person who is, he's literally a being of light. He's like Thor's older brother of Thor, and he's Thor's kind of what can I say? Jiminy Cricket. He looks after Ball, and he's his conscience. Thor, of course, is the personification of everything violent in the natural world. That's has no. I mean, lightning is a classic example. Zaps people for no reason because it's just science. But of course, humans want to put add a an aspect of divine intervention. There's a reason for everything, right? Vengeful God and stuff. So, so Boulder was the reason. He was the one. He was the glue holding everything together, and hence he was a being of light. He glowed gold. That was kind of a unique thing for our show. I pitched that he just floated around, like he didn't even need to. He was so full of light that he didn't even have to walk most of the time. I think there's only one scene where he actually walked with Sif when they're talking about him saving his brother. But he is a so with that character, yeah, I did a whole bunch of Peter O'Toole. Well, Peter O'Toole was also for Loki, but he was a very aristocratic, elegant, refined. All his acting was very internal and controlled. There was no grand motion. Like Thor was all big, you know, Boulder was very uh, contained and super high status. He didn't high status characters barely have to move, right? They're the one they enter a room, they take up all the space just naturally because of their personality. That was Boulder. But yeah, so every character was given I had to delineate everyone. So this is how this particular person will stand. This is how this particular person will wield a weapon. This is how this particular character will like like Ufa, the werewolf. He was just a natural force, of nature for the most part, who was very heavily scarred, as we find out in the show. I don't want to give any too much away in case someone's not watched it, but he's done some horrible things in his past, and that magic gets used. So yeah, I mean, it's every character got the full treatment and a little clip. And so when I presented it to Zilam, who ended up being our partner studio, the animators had all this material to sink their teeth into.
that's really cool. And also, I like what you said about Balder. And one of my favorite shots in the show is when Thor's killing all the giants and Balder's just standing there as the blood like goes over him. He doesn't
Yeah,
react.
right. Yeah, that's a great shot. Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah,
kind of
that's
like
right.
he's.
Yeah, sorry.
So I was gonna say it's kind of like he's stuck being Thor's babysitter basically for the show. Like he has to like accompany him for all of his like war crimes essentially.
Well, he's like, he's trying to keep it all together. Like Odin's having problems, right? And Thor is having problems, right? Because he's got Sigrid who's out to get him, and she can kill him, right? She has a weapon to kill him. And he Boulder loves his brother, but he's also always frustrated with his brother.
Yeah.
There's a scene earlier where he appears and he lets um, Thor know that one person survived, which was Sigrid, and she's out to get him. And of course, Thor's like, no one can get me, but I'm intrigued by this. But Boulder's not happy with Thor. He's like, you shouldn't have done it, right? You didn't. And Thor did it because he's annoyed that Loki was off cohorting with giants when he shouldn't have been. But that Loki was half ice giant or something, frost giant, whatever
Yeah,
he
Frost
was.
Giant.
Frost giant, yeah. So Loki was he's a very essential character in one way. He likes cohorting with the giants and making these very unusual children. So anyway, it's Boulder in the end, of course, sacrifices himself, right, to save his brother. I shouldn't. People haven't watched it. I'm sorry, but yeah. Anyway, he literally becomes light after it, right? He ascends as a light, as a beam of light. So it's he is a his character is. I mean, I suppose the most Christ-like, I suppose, of all of them. He's the most selfless. His intellect, his reason, his control, and sheer power. You don't actually see him wield any power really, but he's incredibly powerful too.
Hmm.
So.
I think also like hearing that makes me kind of curious. Were there any backstories written for characters that you did when you were making this big world Bible that aren't like that isn't necessarily in the show a ton, but like you felt was there for like reference?
Well, there's a whole bunch of, I think the show does a really good job at explaining a lot of the characters because Eric Caruso, he did a lot of research and was really into looking at these, getting the characters right, you know. So I really didn't have to do too much because it's all there. It's all there in the mythology of the Nordic mythology. One of our actors, he who's actually was he Danish? He's a Danish actor. Um, he mentioned that he loved the fact that the representation of these characters are very accurate to what he was brought up with. Piotr and Albach, I think his name is. He played Thor, and
Yeah.
he was super excited. Like when we're doing ADR at the end of the show, we did a whole bunch of extra recordings from him of him with monologues and things, and he was just so excited about the show. And so and Eric had worked with him on another production, and so they knew each other, and yeah, they were very so honestly, I didn't have to do much for to develop. I only had to guide the studios into getting them right. It's that's one of the beauties of having, and I suppose challenges because you want to get it right, but you have so much source material in regards to who these characters are. So,
I guess expanding on like the a lot of stuff with Thor. One of the scenes I saw you did was expanding the scene where he massacres all the giants, and
yes,
that's one of my favorite like villain entrances of the last few years. And I was wondering how you handled that. I saw you added the monologue right before, and was like, "Joy
yes,
I take." Yeah.
yes. Well, that monologue came literally on the at the last minute. So we were doing the show, and there was an opportunity to expand some of the sequences. And Zach, of course, has often all these other subplots and things going on. So he asked me to come in and just board thumbnail a whole bunch of different sequences. So yeah, I came in and I expanded that whole last battle. So it just appeared it made the Giants more kind of doing battle with him because they are a very powerful force. I mean, they're not as powerful as Thor, of course, because he kills them all, but they are a force to be reckoned with, right? And up until that point, they're we fear no gods. They're very defiant against the Asgardian gods. So I wanted Zach was like, let's make it a little bit more, of a battle, right? So I basically had them all get up and do their, lockdown and charge him and fight him and he's at one stage is kind of overcome by them and then he just zaps then he just goes into Thor mode. Uh, and the monologue. So the last minute, we were doing ADR, and Eric said, "I would love, seeing we have this little bit of extra, you know, funds. I'd love to add a monologue because initially you had one and we had to cut it out. And there was actually a whole bunch of little sections that were cut out that we could put back in. There was another section that we had for um, oh, Sigrid's father, whose name I forget, but he has this chat to her while they're cleaning up the where they're going to have the wedding, and it's just, showing the subtext that Loki has been there, right? And I can't talk about it, but everything will be fine, And Loki's sitting out there watching them as a lizard. So yeah, it's we did that monologue at the last minute, and I have to thank Zilam, who is a production studio, for being able to be very accommodating. Mathieu and Zilam, who are the two animation people there, and they were the ones who were able to push that through at the last minute, and it made that whole sequence even more kind of horrible because he's there like what's he gonna do, and then he just like he gets more and more worked up and angry, and then he just all hell breaks loose and he just obliterates a whole people, genocides them. Yeah, anyway.
I remember in particular that shot that really like made my jaw drop was when he phases through the one giant, like splits him in
Yes,
half.
yes, yes, there was those extra powers, they were developed in the initial board. So the initial Jay and his team with Eric and Zach did a great job. But they developed, these are the powers of Thor. So we just had to. That was from the original board. So the phasing thing, being able to phase through creatures and literally slice them because of the electrical energy. Yeah, and he phases also through the altar at the beginning, right?
Yeah, when he's walking
And
through it.
yeah, and through the episode, especially in the battle at the end, they're about to kill him, and he's able to come more of a incorporate form, and weapons just pass through him. So he's a very hard creature to kill, Thor, because he can, if he sees the attack coming, can transmute to different forms. So yeah, but that was a fabulous sequence. He basically displays all his terrible powers within about 3 minutes of just bloodshed, and is able to. Yeah, it is a bit of a shock. Like when I first saw that, I'm like, oh my goodness, this has gone like a hard left turn. But it sets up the whole story arc, right, for the whole series. It's a revenge tale of Sigrid who's got everything against her, but she's determined to take him down. So,
I was describing it to one of my friends as like it's like Kill Bill in Norse mythology, basically.
uh, kind of. I mean, yeah, the Kill Bill was a revenge tale too, definitely. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking of Kill Bill's a spaghetti western. That's what, especially with the music.
I just
But
mainly
yeah.
thinking of because of the wedding, like the bride.
Oh yes, yes. She betrays Bill. Even though
Yeah.
Bill's just a damaged goods and wouldn't do it, wouldn't marry her anyway. So yeah, she wanted to get out. That was her. They won't touch me if I'm. My groom doesn't know who I am. I mean, I just want to disappear into the desert of California, and everyone's good. But no, Bill has to come and just like exterminate everyone because he's just a horrible person.
And
Yeah.
this time the difficulty's up because it's Thor. They're trying to go after.
Well, Thor is part of the natural world too. There's a scene when Sif is talking to Balder, right? Because Thor is just does what he wants. He's horrible, but Sif needs Thor, and Thor needs Sif, right? Because she's the goddess of harvest and bounty, and the when the natural world is healthy, and Thor produces the rain.
Right.
So it's everything's interconnected. That's the trick.
All right, I guess another one of my questions was just were there any scenes changed significantly throughout the process, either during the boarding phase or in the middle of production that you would have liked to see? Or you mentioned some that were like added later on, like the monologue.
Yeah, well, we had to do an extensive boarding. It wasn't that the boards, look, the boards are actually really good overall for Twilight overall. But there are a whole bunch of sequences that we had to do quite a lot of work to get it working in 2D. Mainly the action sequences, just because of keeping geography in consistent, keeping and because you're a 2D show, right? Not you're not actually having 3D elements. Keeping where characters are placed in different times of different battles. The dragon fight between Fafnir because he's so humongous and our characters, because that's like a 3D. Literally, the people flying through the air and jumping up and hitting him, and he flies, and I mean, it's all over the place. So, and it all happens on this little bluff that's coming off the side of a cliff. So that was we had to do a lot of work getting that right. Um, Also the final battle sequence. Oh my goodness, for episode 7 and 8. When they come over the bridge, where they are in front of the Asgard, how big Asgard's wall is, where different parts of the battle happen, why our character's not seen by the army, because they're right here, all these trying to make sure that it makes sense. And we added, like, there was an extra section in episode 7 that we added where they battle through and they have these crazy monsters that come up that are these goat demons with the eyeball in their chest. And we had to read. That was a whole new section. And in the final battle in episode 8, there's a whole bunch of different things we had to redo because where is Ufa? Where does he turn into? Where do these ships come down in the back? They come down from Valhalla. Where are they still there now? When Thor does his nuclear blast, I mean, it's like all these very, very complex, I mean, supernatural, larger than life battle things that are happening that we had to keep, in check. Where Thor battles our heroes, do they get where the rest of the battle is still happening between the Aesir and the Earth spirits and Earth people. And yeah, it was it's a lot of work. Where when Sigrid gets when what's her name? That wonderful character who was I don't remember her name now. Hervor. When Hervor dies, right? This very, very dramatic, sad scene, right? Hervor, who's been Sigrid's right-hand person the whole show and stoic and strong and has had to deal with the death of her sons, all this sort of stuff. And she dies protecting Sigrid from a final blow from Thor. And then she doesn't go and see her sons in Valhalla. I mean, it's just, where does that happen? How does that happen? Where are all the soldiers and wherever, it's a lot of work. So yes, we did have to do. We had the guts of the story, but we had to really make sure that the geography and where everything took place made sense for the viewer. And I'm a real stickler for that. I mean, I hate when they don't pay attention or the editing's off or something's screen directions off or you set up the location, you set up the world building, and then everything goes awry. I mean, just throws me out of the story. I just cease to believe that the filmmakers just gotten lazy. So yeah, that was a lot of work. So pretty much a lot of the show.
Do you have a favorite sequence to work on?
I really well, there's a bunch of points that really hard to hit, for the emotional story to work, the to people for people to be invested in these characters. I think we spent a lot of time getting this last sequence in episode 8 working with Sigrid and her emotional response to Hervor dying, and then her, pulling herself together and defying, even though everything is lost, still standing up to Thor. And that was a big part to get that hitting right. And I think we did a good job of that. I mean, I got emotion. I was emotionally moved when she, says, "Life, gods," and off she goes to attack Thor again, and then Thor turns on Balder. But so there's that. I mean, it's action's hard to do and get it right. A lot of it's like just screen craft, getting eye lines working, getting the tempo working in the action sequence, getting the right camera angles, looking at interesting ways to portray it. Uh, but it's the emotional beats that are the most tricky to get right, and that's in any for me, to really get that emotion reading and get the audience getting affected by it. So yeah, they're the hardest bits. There's a scene like I keep coming back to the scene which I we had to redo. I redid that for them where they were Boulder and Stiff are walking up towards the top of Asgard to see the battle progressing in the distance, and that's a huge pivotal moment for Boulder because he she says save Thor's life. I love him, and if he's gone, we're doomed. Like Earth is doomed, man is doomed. So that was, and that whole thing with him, the bird flying up, and him talking about being immortal and being it's a curse, and how Thor is jealous of humanity and their limited life, and that's kind of like the core of all mythology, right? The gods, even though men fear and envy the gods because of their power and their immortality, but gods gods envy humans because they are limited, very intense lives. Anyway, this that's the hardest thing I think to get those moments working.
I guess, sorry, two more questions. So, as someone who researched these characters for a while you were making the building, do you view Thor as someone with more complex morals than what we initially see? Because I saw an interview with Zach where he was saying he's like, like Thor, he's got troubles with his family, he's got troubles with his dad, he said that in future seasons he would have liked to have a more like heroic side of him. But I'm curious what your read of Thor is, whether
Oh,
he's like,
I think Thor is a very complex character, and I mean we were in production. Netflix had actually commissioned the writing of the second season, and from what I understand, Zach, Debbie, and Wes and Jay and Eric wanted to make a three-season arc for this show, which would have been fantastic. So we only saw the opening the opening salvo of the story. And not that I know any real specifics of it, but I think the second season, it starts with the end of the last season, we got Thor and Sigrid in Asgard, right? Two arch enemies. And Thor is like, hey, we're together now, honey. And she's like, I hate you. And so it was going to have, that was going to, the story was going to progress from there. And of course, we have Odin, who's the All Father, in a terrible situation, right? He doesn't know who he is anymore because his memory's been taken, right? Sid Kona took the Raven and gave him the power of foresight, but took his memory. So he's kind of wandering around. I think he's wandering around the world having problems, right? He doesn't know who he is. And they can't, I mean, it's a classic mythological. I mean, there's just so many mythologies use that as the all powerful god. I mean, I think in Hindu mythology, Shiva is walking around. He doesn't know who he is for ages as well as he's wandering around as a hermit, even though he's kind of like
all
part of the
powerful?
Trinity. Yeah, Shiva the Destroyer. So it's a common mythological angle, right? To have the most powerful being in trouble. So there were, and Thor, of course, has father issues, right? He's always Thor Odin protecting him, and he's like, there's one scene in our show where he's like yakking, and I'm gonna, you sent your henchman out to kill her, but I'm gonna kill her. Blah, 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 blah. So he's got father issues. Boulder, the brother he loves has gone, and so Thor, I think in the second season he does go through a changes, right? And I have no idea what they are personally, but I do know that there was going to be this arc of Odin, Thor, and Sikona's now a god too, right? So there's a lot that was going to happen, which I'm really disappointed that Netflix killed it because I thought it was going to be a great second and third season. But yeah.
I guess actually, yeah, you kind of answered that, but what would you have liked to see in like a hypothetical season two and three? Like I know the story's kind of building up to Ragnarok, so would you have wanted to
Yeah.
continue this apocalyptic direction?
Oh yeah, no, I mean all the materials there in the mythology, and you'd want to stay true to the mythology for the most part. I think we have uh you have the Earth God, what do you call it? Sandra Diga, the Earth serpent, right? She's going like she takes Thor down originally, like eventually, and the wolf, what was his name? I've forgotten his name.
Fenrir.
Fenrir, yes, Fenrir, who becomes there's visions of what's his name has visions, Odin in the end of our show of what Ragnarok's what's gonna happen, and he's not, and then he sees himself on the world tree, and he sees the rise of the new belief systems, which is in Northern Europe was Christianity. So yeah, it's I think that's alluding to what will happen eventually. I mean, I think the second season is more like from what I would like to see is more like a road movie of these characters who really don't like each other having to work together. So that creates a lot of great drama, and they get to understand each other. Honestly, I don't know how Sigurd's ever going to forgive Thor for what he did, but there might be something there that they write in that would some element that would bring them closer together. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
I mean, we see
yeah,
like Thor. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go on, no, go on.
I was gonna say we see that Thor is kind of like a. I think they do a good job showing that he's like volatile. Like one moment he's like super angry and like hurting his family, and the next he's like kissing his son on like the head. Like
Yes, he's well. I mean, he's the natural world, right? He's literally 1 minute he's beautiful, peaceful, and everyone's loving. Everyone's happy, and then the next minute a volcano erupts and or earthquake happens and kills people indiscriminately. So that's Thor. He is both, and he's a very passionate character. He's in our show he has an affair with defeat, right? The goddess of defeat. Like he hardly ever loses, and he loses against Sigrid in front of the what are they
Vanir.
called? Yeah, whether the Earth Kingdom. So he is a complex character. He's very juvenile and very volatile, but underneath it all, like there's another interchange between him and Sif where she's saying to him, "You're betting defeat, right? You want to die. Is that your method?" You know, and he's just, of course, really crass with her, but he's very, he knows she's right. He knows but he's kind of compelled because he's so annoyed. He has to be, he's like the absolute like toxic masculinity pinnacle. He's out there trying to, smash everything that doesn't do what he wants. So yeah, it's there is a lot of complexity to Thor that we would have seen in the second season. Yeah, and I would have loved to have seen that. And there's also all the human relationships too. You have Leif and his relationship with Sigrid, who that ended, pretty dramatically. And you have, of course,
Egil
what was it?
and Sidekona
Yeah,
are still alive.
yeah. What was her name? Uh,
Thera?
Thera. Yeah, Thera, who's she's a human, but she's brought up by the Earth spirits, and she loves. She's had this crazy relationship with Sigrid and Leif, right? Which was quite explicit. And and she has this, she loves them both, but who does she love more? There's this weird triangle, relationship going. So if Sigrid comes back to the mortal world, what's going to happen there? And then you have Sidkana, and Egil, right? And their relationship, right? There's that he's now with a goddess, you know, who's who's a who's a trans character too, which is an interesting bent on the. So there was so much meat in the story, where we could go with it. But yeah, I think all of those exploring all of those relationships would have been really interesting.
I was really hoping a Surtur would show up too if they were to do a second and third.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I didn't hear anything about that. But the main Eric and Zach were the ones who were really crafting it, so they were keeping things close to their chest. It would have been if we would have got the go ahead, then I would have been come involved and we would have started boarding it. But unfortunately, alas, it didn't happen. But there was, like I said, there were Zach and Jay and Eric had a 3 season arc for the story. So yeah, maybe one day it'll be made. We'll see. See what happens.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, Andrew. We had a really great time discussing the show, getting a deep dive with you.
Oh, good. Well, my pleasure. Yeah, it was a really fun show to work on. I enjoyed it a lot. And it was great working with Zach and Debbie and Wes and Sherry and the whole creative crew here and in Paris. And I know we were all very proud of what we produced. Yeah, no, I'm glad to shed some light on the inner workings of the show. So yeah, no problem. Have a
All
good
right. Thank
one.
you so much. Good luck with Motel Transylvania as well.
Oh yeah. Oh no, Motel. Well, Motel is that show is terrific. I have to say, I'm going to put a plug into it for it. Um, it it's it's been in production for a number of years now, and the writing is phenomenal. The comedy is incredible. The animation quality is pretty much feature level that we're producing. Sony has been really good at creating an environment to actually produce um, really good quality animation and effects for an episodic show. And some of the characters we're doing for this show, it's 20 episodes that are going to come out. Some of the episodes are just fantastic. So I'm really proud of this show. I think it'll be if people like the movies, they're going to absolutely adore this show. So yeah, cool. All right, thanks, mate. Have a good one.
All right. You have a good one, Andrew. Bye.
Okay, bye bye.